Started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another JINSA webinar. I'm Blaise Mishtal, JINSA's Vice President for Policy, and we'll be doing an update today on operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion to learn the latest about the Iran war and where it might go from here. I'm delighted to be joined by Vice Admiral Herman Shelanski, former commander of the Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier and carrier strike group, which he commanded during Operation Iraqi Freedom, including in the Persian Gulf, an area that is of some interest today, as well as JINSA Distinguished Fellow and former Israeli National Security Advisor, Major General Yaakov Amidror. Admiral General, good afternoon to you. Thank you both for being with us.
Good night.
Yes, good evening.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Admiral Shelanski, let me perhaps start with you to get your take on the status of U.S. operations, Epic Fury, and where they are as we're now reaching the end of the third week of the war against Iran. Where do you see the operation going? Particularly, do you see sort of a transition in phases and targeting and what the U.S. is focused on during its operation? Or are we still sort of in that same phase of going after the same target set as we were in the opening days of the war?
Well, yes. Well, thanks, Blaise. And let me just say it's an honor to be here. And for those of us that have been in the Navy, carrier Navy, and naval aviation throughout our careers, it seems like we always end up back in the Middle East, Persian Gulf. I mean, even as a junior officer back in 1985, during the reign, through 88 in the first Gulf War. It seems to be a replay of all of our events. And we've been planning for this type of event seriously for 20, 25 years at least, and have good operational plans that have been in existence and have been practiced in many different places and then different areas. So what you see today is, sort of the culmination of this, incredible war machine that our navies put together, our Air Force, and really United States Joint Force, and its ability to reach out over great distances and strike precision targets. And the leadership, the technology, the joint operations, the skill set of our sailors and our airmen, and everyone that's involved in this operation, you can really see it coming together. I mean, you can really see it really being effective as we reduce the targets throughout Iran and those things that have, the capabilities that they have in terms of taking, layer by layer, moving in, getting rid of their air defenses, getting rid of their intelligence, getting rid of their communications. And this strike package, the joint strike package, has been really effective. So I think we're kind of at a turning point now, because as the Iranians, as always, the enemy does have a say in any type of warfare, as they increase their threats, which is particularly the Straits of Hormuz, which they've always controlled, and their ability to do so. I think we're going to see more of a shift, if it hasn't already happened in the last day or so, to do better to integrate the strikes and the capability that they have, the ongoing capability that they've showed that they have to take out targets within the Gulf. I don't think it's that far away, though, from us being effective in terms of knocking out those capabilities, even though there's thousands of them. They have launchers on trucks, and it's a tough strike problem. But our national intelligence and our capability has really shown that we were able to do it. And of course, working alongside the Israelis is just a pleasure. And with their capabilities and their ability to target and their intelligence, really makes for an amazing team. So, in particular, I think we've seen a really good thrust. We've seen great effects. I think we're going to see more of that in the next couple of days, up to a week. There's a little bit of a glitch in it in terms of the the USS Gerald Ford has got to kind of go back from the front line there and go into port for a week or so for repairs. And we can talk more about that as we go on, what that may portend for the pace of the operations.
Thank you, Admiral. General Amidror, let me ask you the same question on the Israeli side. Sort of, how do you assess the effectiveness of Operation Roaring Lion now almost 3 weeks in? Sort of what is the phase that we're in, and how does Israel think about sort of what's going to be happening in the days to come in this war? And you're still on mute, General.
People are looking for phases, and I think that this is a long planned operation. Of course, every night making detailed plans for the next 72 hours. But there is a list of targets which had been there for a long time. And both the Americans and the Israelis are going each side in his way, going kind of a ladder of priorities. Begin with the highest priority, the missile issue, the missile production, the nuclear and so on and so forth. And parallel to that, there are another two missions that all the time should be fulfilled. One is to oppress the ability of the Iranians to launch missiles into Israel and other countries around Iran, the Gulf countries, and to identify and kill decision makers in Iran, which are connected to the military terrorist organizations, both the civilians and with uniform. All these four efforts, the bombing all the infrastructure relating to the capabilities of the Iranians, either it is economic capabilities, industrial capabilities, what you call industrial base system, everything which is related to the missile production, the nuclear project, everything should be destroyed. And every day we are destroying more and more and more and more. And there is a long list for the next, I don't know, another 4 weeks. I don't see any big change in that. Of course, every day it's a lower priority, so there is nothing to write home about. Its target should be destroyed. At the end of the day, what we want to achieve, the Iranians will not have the ability to go back to the nuclear project. There is one problem, the elephant in the room, the 450 kilogram of enriched uranium that I don't know where it is, and even if the intelligence knows where it is exactly, an operation to take it out is very complicated. It's possible, but very complicated. But they cannot have the ability to resume the nuclear project, to re-begin the production of long-range missiles. And all in all, they will be much weaker. People are speaking about the regime change. If you remember from the beginning, I said this is something that you cannot put as a military goal. You cannot guarantee it by military action. People are saying that the Mossad and the CIA are working very hard inside Iran to promote the capabilities of the opposition. Maybe I don't know. But anyhow, at the end of the day, we can guarantee, America and Israel together, we can guarantee, this coalition can guarantee a very weak Iran at the end. We cannot guarantee a regime change. This is something that should come from the Iranians. If they decide to do it, we can help them. Think about demonstrations in which an Israeli or American are above the area, and from time to time they interfere and kill Basij people which try to stop the demonstrators. It's not something which is impossible in the present situation in which The Americans and the Israelis are fully control. They have full control of the skies of Iran. It is not an impossible mission to help the demonstrators. So I don't know what will happen with the opposition of the Iranian opposition. That is not in the hands of the military guys. It is not something that you can count on. It is not something that you can plan. What we can do, and we are doing very systematically, is to reduce the capabilities of the regime. If it is destroying the Navy, the Air Force, which is always very weak, the Basij people, to kill Basij people and commanders, the infrastructure, everything which is part of the strong capability of the strong mechanism of the Iranians, either to produce or to oppress. Both should be eliminated as much as possible, and it's a question of time. You know, there was someone from the BBC was here in my home, and she asked me, okay, what do you need to complete the mission? I looked at her and said, time. That's all.
General, if I could stay with you and dive in a little deeper into the different elements of the Iranian regime and its capabilities that you said it's important to destroy or degrade, and going first with the nuclear. I think we've seen some strikes on the nuclear program, but there are some thorny issues. There's, as you said, the actual enriched uranium and whether it stays in Iran or trying to get it out is thorny. But there's also sites that are hard to hit, like Fordow, which was hit in Operation Midnight Hammer, but we don't know if it was fully destroyed. There's also a new facility at Pickaxe Mountain, which is supposedly even more fortified, but maybe not yet operational. Is there planning between the U.S. and Israel about how to get at some of these hard nuclear sites and challenges to make sure that Iran has no nuclear capabilities at the end of this?
These two examples that you gave can be done only by the Americans. We don't have the heavy bombs that you have. And both sides are planning everything together. They can sit and decide that another attempt to destroy it. It was done in Natanz, which are probably totally destroyed again. And some projects near Isfahan, which are very important. Israel does not have the ability to penetrate those very deep, ungrounded facilities. It can be done only by the Americans, and if it will be agreed that the Americans will bring their heavy bombers and do it, it will be done.
On missile capabilities, Israel has been suffering the last couple of days with increased Iranian use of cluster munitions on its ballistic missiles. Is there a strategy or capability that the Israelis can bring to better defeat those weapons or hunt them more effectively?
These missiles are like every missile. There is no any difference between intercepting these missiles and intercepting other missiles. This cluster's munition is in a way much easier to defend ourselves from. If you are in a building, for sure in the special room that we have in almost every apartment in Israel, or in my shelter, which is underground, this sub munition cannot penetrate it. You have to have very, very bad luck that someone will be hurt inside the safe room when they use it. This submunition was against people running somewhere, gathering somewhere, not undercover. It's make a lot of damage to cars in the street, but very few Israelis had been killed or injured by that. There is one couple from Ramat Gan that they hadn't been in the safe room when it happened. It penetrated the seal of the room and they had been killed. But I don't know about anyone in a safe room which had any problem with that. It's much easier to be safe when they use this cluster submunition. Yes, of course, if it is a group of people somewhere which are not going to a safe room, that will be a disaster. But most of the Israelis are very how to call it, disciplined, and whenever there is siren in Israel, probably the vast majority of the Israelis are taking shelter in those places, and the cluster munition is not a threat.
Lastly, let me ask you, you mentioned economic infrastructure as one of the four groups of targets that Israel has to deny the Iranian regime capabilities and weaken it if it does stay in place. But yesterday, the strike on the South Pars gas field was, I think, a different type of strike on a different type of target than we've seen Israel or the United States hit so far. And there's been dissenting reporting in the U.S. about whether that was a strike that was coordinated with the United States or not. President Trump described it as being out of anger. Can you tell us a little about what Israel was trying to accomplish with that strike and what you know about whether that was something that was jointly planned or not?
I don't know about any anger in Israel. We are very sober. There is no any anger in Israel, and there is a huge satisfactory from the cooperation with the Americans. Israel was number 8 in the measurement of happiness around the world, so I don't think that there is any eagerness here. I believe, I don't know, I believe that the way that we are working together, the Americans had been notified about the plan. How far it went and how up it went in the American system, I don't know. I don't know. Probably the president, as he said, does know about it. And the prime minister just said publicly that we agree to stop it and we will wait with another kind of this kind of targets. And I probably in the future, if someone in Israel will have an idea how to do it, it will be much more coordinated than before. My belief that it was coordinated in the low level, and it didn't go up in the ladder to the president.
Admiral Shelanski, let me come back to you.
Yep.
The strike on the South Pars gas field sort of returned focus to the lack of energy coming out of the Gulf right now, and obviously strikes on critical energy infrastructure is part of it, but risks to shipping is also part of the problem. I wanted to get your thoughts on the ability of the United States and or allies and partners to be able to get ships out of the Gulf through the Strait safely. President Trump has talked about perhaps providing escorts, but there's the threat of mines. We don't seem to have any counter mine ships in the area right now. What would it take to try to get ships through the Strait safely?
Yeah, so I'll just comment on what the general said. I'm a believer that that strike was coordinated. In this type of coalition warfare, central command are the that's where it's all coming together. The liaison groups, there's communication that's gone on, all day long. I'm sure the United States military portion of it, you just don't. Neither nation is ever going to be sending a strike, through a full defensive area without the other nation knowing it, right? So I'm sure that there was big coordination. I think what we're seeing is that now Iran is playing their card. It's like the enemy always has a say, and they're playing their economic card. And as we realize in the United States and the global economy is now being hit, because that's what is it that Iran can do to defend itself? They're failing, militarily. They can't stop us from hitting virtually anything we want. So what are they doing? They're lashing out in anger, so to speak, and sending missiles all over, the Middle East, but Saudi Arabia, UAE, maybe even into Turkey, into Oman, especially into Israel. I mean, this is a lash out, but their real strength, and this is, harken back to kind of my war college days about like what's the center of gravity in terms of the operation that's going to really bring Iran to its heels. Now, and I agree with the general. I mean, at the very least, at the end of this war, we're going to have a neutered Iran. They're going to have little capability. They're going to be little of a very meek threat, except of course, for the missing nuclear stuff. So that that's a big strategic thing about what to do about that. But this has opened up the next phase, I think, in terms of now they're really lashing out to tankers in the Gulf. And they do have a capability to stop traffic. They always have. They've created lots of cruise missile capability that are mobile. They have the drones, which can be effective against an unarmed ship. All right, so let's face it, if you're a merchant ship and a drone with small amounts of explosives or some type of fire type of explosive lands on your ship, the merchant ships have like 30, 40 people. They're not really capable of defending themselves. They don't have really defensive capabilities, and to put out a huge conflagration like that, it's tough. So now everyone's worried, and this is exactly the effect that Iran wants to have. They want to put fear, they want to, put a crimp on the economy, and and I think that's why, of course, the president said, let's hold off on any economic things right now so that we can keep gas moving, because it does have an effect on the world. But there's a secondary effect to this, right? And the secondary effect, in my belief, is that, the Straits of Hormuz, it's an international passageway. The Iranians, though they border it from 500 miles, they actually have no right to stop traffic from going through there. This now becomes, when they stop traffic, an international, strategy for them. But it's backfiring on them because the world depends on the Straits of Hormuz. So if they wanted to keep our allies out, which, I don't want to argue whether, they're mad at us because we didn't ask permission or, didn't involve them at the beginning. Every nation has oil pretty much coming through the Gulf. And so this has now become an international crisis. And now I think we're going to see allies stepping up to the plate, and they're going to send ships, and you can escort. I mean, it's not easy, but you can escort tankers. We've done it before. We know how to do it. And we have the capability, we have the technology to shoot down cruise missiles, shoot down drones, and bring that oil flowing again. So yes, we can do it. It's going to take a concerted effort in terms of the number of ships that we're going to need to make it work. And, we're probably going to need our allies to help us. Of course, in any type of warfare like this, the best thing to do is always to get to the source before they can even launch their missiles. I mean, I can guarantee you right now, CENTCOM and Israel focused on where those things are on the ground before they can launch them. And once we are able to focus on those and get rid of that capability, our ability to start moving tankers through the Gulf, through the Straits of Hormuz is going to happen. It's going to happen quickly. And once it does, there'll be a lot of lessons learned in that. But I think this is going to happen very quickly, and we're going to see it starting to lessen the effect of their kind of punch in the face, the Iranians. So after that, if they can't close the straits and they can't stop us from hitting anything, what's left to them? And that's really the question, I think, where eventually we can go with this to and as the general said, it's going to take time. We can't be impatient in this. We can't allow this to end prematurely. It's going to take some time to get that established, to get the right warfare commander, to move those ships in and out of the Gulf so that we can, bring the world economy back. But I think it's all in the possible, and we've trained for this. And frankly, the sooner the Allies, get their ships over there, the better off the world is going to be.
So just to sort of dig into that a little further, Admiral, can you give us some more specifics about what types of naval assets we would need to have in the Gulf to execute a mission of protecting the tanker traffic and escorting them? Is it moving in the Lincoln carrier and its strike group, or is it different type of naval assets? And do we have them in the region, or do we need to bring them from somewhere else in the world?
So first I'll say it's not a good idea right now to bring the Abraham Lincoln into the Gulf. They're doing just fine where they are, and it just adds an extra level of risk. We've operated. I mean, I brought the Truman in there. We operated into Iraq and Afghanistan from there. The advantage of it is that you can generate a whole lot more strikes. So in other words, if I launch airplanes off the carrier and they're only going to go 150 miles as opposed to 600 miles, I can cycle them a lot quicker. I can put more bombs on target throughout the day. But I think the risk right now is too large to even consider that right at the moment. So then the question is, well, what are we lacking? So we sadly moved all of our mine hunting ships out of the Gulf. They're all in the anticipation of Straits of Malacca and in the South China Sea, and what we would do to take care of mines in that region, thinking that, at some point, the threat from Iranian mines is gone. I will say I don't think we've seen any mines yet. I think the Navy did a good job about, wiping out a lot of the mine crafts, the mine laying capabilities that the Iranians had. Now, granted, you can go out in a rowboat and drop a few mines in the waters. Anyone could do that. But I think the shoreline and the infrastructure where those mines are has been relatively devastated. So the best course of action would be to get some type of mine hunting capability, whether helicopters or mine hunting ships, get them in there quickly, and have them part of the escort. So you would need surface combatants. You'd either need destroyers, corvettes, depending on what country you have. You need a robust air defense system, and there's a way to do it so that you keep the ships on the sort of the southern part of the transit as they go through. You need great intelligence. You need great airborne early warning. You need to be able to react quickly. You probably need to have a combat air patrol up, air defense. All those things, we know how to do. And I think we're going to be well set to do them once we set up the plan to start this whole escort capability.
General Amidror, is there a role?
I will not be surprised if prior to escorting ships in the strait, if that would be the decision, we will see a very extensive operation to neutralize the threats from the land, mainly missiles that the Iranians have. I remember in the past they gave some of their missiles to Hezbollah, and they have few types of land sea missiles. And if that will be neutralized, what will remain in their hands is the ability to launch drones from far away, and maybe cruise missiles. And with that, I think the Navy has the capability to deal. But close missiles from the land ship missiles that they will come from the Iranian side of the strait, that will be very short time to defend it. It's very problematic. When the cruise missile is coming from far away, it's easier to deal with it. It's complicated, but still easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're on the shoreline of the choke point there, you have 20, 30 seconds to react, and so you have to have really close-in weapon systems that enable you to shoot down these missiles as they come at you. But as the general said, yeah, we got to, if we haven't already done it, that whole piece of within 600-mile radius of the strait to take out any type of missiles that we know, that needs to be done. We have a great capability in terms of detecting targets. We have, the combination between, of course, our satellite capability and the new Hawkeye E-2D airborne early warning radar, in conjunction with the F-35 capability. All those integrated systems now allow us to detect these things further off or as they're getting ready to launch them. We did a lot of work over the last 20 years detecting movable targets. It used to be a real pain for us. I mean, it's still a challenge, but we've gotten much better at our capability about finding them, take them out before they even get off the launch site. But as the general said, if someone shoots a missile and they're on the coast and you're only, 8-10 miles away, you don't have a lot of time. So you've got to have your weapons have got to be on alert, and you got to be ready to shoot down anything that moves. But again, that's what we do, and I think we should be ready to do that.
Yeah. General, is Israel able to lend any assistance to this mission of securing the Gulf, either to the air mission, as you described it, of suppressing the coastal fire capabilities, or perhaps lending any of its naval assets, the SAR corvettes, to a mission in the Gulf? You're on mute, General.
There is a visit of a carrier in Israel, and you take the whole Israeli Navy to visit the carrier, on the carrier will be more American sailors than Israelis. So I think Navy-wise, we don't have any capability that can help the Americans to deal with the challenge. Air Force the Air Force is part of the coalition, and whatever will be declared or agreed as targets that will be destroyed by us. We have some capabilities of to identify the exact places, combination of satellites, electronics, and so on and so forth. In that, I'm sure that we and the Americans are sharing the information, and that might be very helpful. So if it is about more aeroplanes on the air and to have more targets to be shattered, that for sure Israel can help. With the Navy, we have to be modest. Our Navy is not for these distances, and it's very, very little. If it is coming to SEALs capabilities, the equivalent of your SEAL, what we are calling Shaytet 13, they have many capabilities. I'm sure that they can cooperate with your SEALs and to have a very strong fist, if you really needed, close the water to act against the enemies, any threats of the Iranians.
Thanks, General. Admiral, you had mentioned earlier on the troubles that the USS Ford is having and its need to return to port at Suda Bay. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the Ford, how long it might be out of the fight, and the implications of that for U.S. operations?
Yeah, so it's sad that they had this fire on board, but these things happen on Navy ships. It's unfortunate when it happened and how much damage it caused. Typical fire on the ship. We're very good at putting out fires. This one, from what I've read, was pretty significant, and to the point where they had to go back in the port to do the repairs. So, you bring an aircraft carrier offline, so you're talking at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And it's, the beauty of a joint carrier operation is the cycling of the aircraft. So there's lots of ways to do it. A typical thing would be, all right, then Lincoln, you've got the day ops, and then Ford, you've got night ops, so that the strikes are happening 24 hours a day. That's the beauty of what we can do. when you have two carriers out there, or really even three if you want to get a third out there. The Ford, in particular, because of its, it is the latest carrier. It's the latest carrier with immense capability, and over, I forget what the number is, something like 40 new technologies on it. When they redesigned the ship, they laid it out in such a way, along with new technologies like better refueling for the airplanes, just where the planes refuel on the deck, how to get the airplanes up to the flight deck faster, how to get the bombs onto the airplanes quicker, how to shoot the airplanes off the deck with these new electromagnetic catapult system, the EMALS, or how to land it with these new systems. I mean, it has brand new propulsion on it too, which is just amazing. But it's the loss of the Ford is not a one carrier loss. It's a 1.5 carrier loss. That's the type of fight the Ford brings. So the Lincoln, the Ford, you'd have 2.5 normal Nimitz class carriers out there. Now you're down to one. So the sooner you can get the Ford back on there, the better it is. Now, with that said, there's a limit, and there's things that are also, I'm sure on the Navy's mind right now, and that crew's been out a long time, and they've been operating for many months. You typically send a crew out on a deployment 7 months, 8 months. I mean, this could go on 10 months, maybe 11 months. That's a hard strain on a crew. Now, in addition to that, and maybe that's where, as people get tired, they make mistakes, and that's maybe where we saw the fire come in. But the second part of that, I think, is people need to know that there's a professionalism part of the sailors and these aviators and the carrier, that whole crew that's out there, that, this is what we train to do. Not that any of us ever hoped or, prayed that we're going to go into a war, but once you start doing these type of operations, you get into a cycle, and there's a feeling that overcomes the exhaustion, so to speak, and that is that we're doing the things that we've been trained to do. We're here for our country, and we're well trained, we're well led, we've got the technology, and now it's a matter of personal perseverance. And hopefully that they don't get too tired, that they overlook the typical safety things. So it's a balance there, and I think maybe we've seen a tip in one direction on the Ford as they had that fire. Now they get to reset a little, and when they send them back, I'm sure they'll be energized and ready to go again.
Admiral, when the Ford does come back, we'll be more than three weeks into this war. Do you think it's time to think about maybe sending the Lincoln back to the Indo-Pacific? Are we assuming undue risk by having taken a carrier out of that theater?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see the Lincoln move anytime soon. In fact, I think what you might see is the George Bush, which is ready to deploy and should be deploying, I think, in about a month or so. I think it's going to head straight over there. And so there's going to be another carrier coming in, and it may be that they want to relieve the Ford. I don't know exactly what the plans are. I mean, it depends on, how well opening the Straits of Hormuz goes. I think if we get the allies over there, if we see that, the continual degradation of the Iranian capability to launch any type of drones or missiles into the Straits is significantly reduced, and that the threat is lessened, then there's possibility to start relieving forces or cycling them in and out, which is what it's the best way to do, with our forces at large, in terms of our strategy for where carriers are in the world, and, not putting all of our assets in one place at one time. There's a danger to that. So.
Thanks. I have one more question for you, General Amidror, and then I want to open it up to the audience. So if you're watching and you do have questions for either General Amidror or Admiral Shelanski, please feel free to submit those using the Q&A function in Zoom, and then I'll be happy to read them out. But General Amidror, I wanted to ask you about another front in this war, namely Lebanon, where Israel is now operating both in the air and on the ground. And if you could tell us a little bit about what the scope of Israeli operations is there and sort of what their objective is.
Okay, it is, don't ask me about carriers. Ours is very secret and we don't speak about it. Lebanon, we are now in defensive posture. People making mistake. We move forces in, but it is part of our defensive posture. We don't move to the next stage of offense. As part of our defense, we decided to push Hezbollah to the north to be sure that first, no ground operation can be done against the communities near the border. And second, that they are losing the line of sight and they cannot launch anti-tank missiles into the civilian community, something that was very horrible in the last round with Hezbollah. So you will find more IDF forces on the ground around 10 kilometers from the border, making all the arrangements to defend themselves and to not let any Hezbollah movement to the south. From time to time, we are making raids into areas in which we have intelligence about gathering of Hezbollah terrorists or preparations, weapon storages, and so on and so forth. But this is not the offensive maneuver of the IDF yet. The decision not to move from defensive to offensive positions and to begin the big ground maneuver in Lebanon was very much connected to the set question that we had about Iran. We don't want to allocate resources which are now very busy in Iran into Lebanon. Mainly Air Force, of course, because ground forces we didn't send to Iran yet. And the decision is that as much as we can to continue with focusing on Iran and allocated only second priority to Hezbollah, that's what we will do. The decision to move to the north is to make the situation such that Israel will not be under pressure because Hezbollah cannot attack the communities in the north. And then it can take a longer time and we will know how to deal with it. Remember that we had forces in the Gaza Strip. We moved regular units from Gaza Strip. Now it's most of the forces in Gaza are reserve forces. We have reserve forces as well in the north, but almost all the regular units move to the north, prepare themselves for the second stage, which would be the offensive stage, but it might take time because we want to focus all our capabilities in Iran to distract as much as possible and to make Iran much weaker. And that was the decision about priority, remaining in defense in Lebanon and to continue the offensive in Iran.
Let me just ask on that, General Amidror, quickly. We know that obviously Hezbollah has fired hundreds of rockets and missiles at Israel since the war began. But was there evidence, was there intelligence indicating that they were also mobilizing that Radwan force for a ground incursion, that they were able to come back to the border area, or is this just a preemptive move in case they were to try to do that?
No, they tried to move some of their Radwan forces back to the south. As you know, in 24, the Radwan forces got a huge blow from Israel. Many of them had been killed, and they retreated to the north. They tried to bring part of it back to the south, not in the same number that they had before. That was identified. Many of them had been killed. But it was not it was preemptive action, not because they prepared something, because we didn't want to be in a position that they can prepare. I mean, we pushed them before they begin all preparations, and they are now, at the end, it probably will be ended close to the Litani in the west, and maybe at the Litani in the east, because there the buffer is not as good as in the west.
Thank you, General. Admiral Shelanski, looks like we have a couple of questions for you. The first one's from Scott Sanders, who asks you about the extra E-2D Hawkeyes that are reportedly inbound to the theater, which I think you had mentioned briefly in discussing the fort and its capabilities.
Yeah, well, Scotty, that's a great question. I'll tell you I'll just harken back. It's dated now, but back in 2012, when I worked at the Pentagon for the Chief of Naval Operations, when I was in assessments, N81, so to speak, and I was tasked by the CNO at that time to take a look at all offensive weapon systems, like throughout the world, of all of our, near peers, enemies, et cetera, and like what capabilities do we have? And there was one airplane that just kept coming up, one capability, which was still in its, basic stages at that time, was the E-2D Hawkeye. And it was the one capability that said, oh, yeah, the Hawkeye can do this, the Hawkeye can do that. And at that time, I remember talking to the community leaders and saying, this great airplane that we're developing, that Northrop Grumman's putting together, and this great radar system, brand new radar system, which is incredibly advanced. There's no country has anything like this in the world. Maybe the Israelis have a little something that's pretty close, but it's going to mean at some point there's going to be a big demand, and we see that demand today. So we've got 5 Hawkeyes. They're on the Lincoln. We have 5 on the Ford, and I think before the Ford was going to be pulled off station, they said we'd like 5 more Hawkeyes. So what? And by the way, the Hawkeye now has in-flight refueling capability, so it can stay up. In the old days, we would do a 5.5 hour mission and have to land to get fuel. Now you can stay up 10 hours, or longer if needed, depending on the mission. Now you have the ability to cycle these airplanes in and out, and it's not surprising that they're sending them over there, because the capability of detection and the coordination and the intelligence, as I said, there's a huge dynamic between the new F-35 and the E-2D. Now you have the ability throughout the Gulf. So, for our other nations, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Oman, now you have an increased capability to be able to detect for them and a better picture for the whole Gulf. And this is really going to play in, of course, very in a big way in terms of the escort through the Strait of Hormuz. So the more eyes in the sky you have, so to speak, and the ability to detect very small targets at long distances, this is the way you'll be able to better defend, better detect early, defend, shoot against, and basically have that much more capability. It's going to be interesting to see where they land base them. There's really not enough room on the carriers right now for them, so they'll probably put them at one of the air bases. Hopefully, at one of the ones that it's a little bit further out, a little bit more secure. But that's okay, because the Hawkeye radar can see over 400 miles. It has over 22 to 30 million square miles of detection space. I think it's a great move, and it's as having been part of that aviation community, it's really great to see them being tasked and challenged how to make this work. And I think it's exciting for the Navy in general, naval aviation, to be able to have this asset available and send it forward in times of warfare. I think this is something that we, have expected for many years.
Well, perhaps we could fly the Hawkeyes out of Ovda Air Base in Israel, where we have some F-35s, and where JINSA has suggested the U.S. base assets. And on that point, we have a question from Charles Wax, who says, can the aircraft from the Ford carrier be based on a land base while the carrier is under repair?
It can be. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could have flown all those off. Now, the issue is, and the beauty of an aircraft carrier is that all of the equipment, the repair, the maintenance crews, the supply chains, the feeding and the housing of all these people are right there on the ship. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to send, 5 airplanes and their maintenance crews to an airbase somewhere, because there's going to have to be a follow-on airplane of people that are going to maintain those airplanes. But it's another to take a whole air wing, of 60 plus, 70 plus airplanes and land them somewhere and expect to have it, the capability to maintain them and launch and recover them the whole time. That's a different story. The answer is yes, a tough problem.
Another couple of questions for you, Admiral Shelanski. Let me fold 2 questions into one, which is, if Iran is able to sustain periodic fire in the Strait, despite an air and naval effort to clear it, what further escalation options are available? And particularly, are ground operations going to be needed by either the Marine Expeditionary Unit that is supposedly underway, or special forces to seize coastal positions either in the islands in the Gulf, or perhaps in Iran itself?
I think it's an option. And I think if the air war is unable to accommodate the safe passage, then I think the next step, if we're serious about and the threat is still there, and we're serious about getting stuff through the straits, then that is a possibility. And that's a good place, I think, to do a ground operation. If we're going to secure something, we ought to secure the strait. It's a lot easier than flying special forces in to find nuclear, Iranian somewhere where we don't know, in the heart of Iran. Not that it's not important and not that it's not needed. I'm just saying it's a whole lot easier for us to get to the straits and secure that with land operations. I hope it doesn't come to that. But I think we see Marines moving into that area. It's a possibility. It's we could do it if needed.
Maybe a last question for both of you, but General Amidror, let me start with you. Sort of, you said that Israel has targets for maybe another 4 weeks trying to degrade Iranian capabilities. But I guess what is the chance that Israel, the United States together, are going to get rid of all Iranian capabilities? What is the possibility that if the regime stays in place, it retains the ability to send a drone or a missile, one a day, one every other day? And what does that do to the security or risk perception of commercial shipping in the Gulf? Is there a possibility that even after we declare the war is over, we would have to maintain naval escorts and air patrols over the Gulf to keep shipping open? General Amador, let me start with you, and then Admiral Shelanski, curious for your thoughts.
I think that we should be humble. Iran is in 92 million people. It's 60 times the state of Israel. It's a huge country with very deep state capabilities. It's not something which was, declared as a state 100 years ago. It is 3,000 years of tradition and knowledge and capabilities. We should be humble. We cannot destroy all capabilities of Iran. We can make Iran weak enough. And from my point of view, how to measure that they are weak enough, that if we, America and Israel, find something which we think might endanger us or countries around Iran. For example, if after 5 years, Iran will try again to rebuild its nuclear capabilities, Iran will be weak enough that we can come again and destroy it. This is the way to measure if Iran is weak again, is weak enough. Iran weak enough means that we can prevent it from making in the future what they did in the past. But to think that we can completely destroy everything in Iran, we should be humble.
I agree.
I think that I think that more professional you are more humble about your capabilities. It's very easy to sit somewhere knowing nothing about what are the challenges, what are the risks, and so on and so forth, and say, we'll destroy everything. It's not going like that. If you are professional, you know there are limitations and risks that you are not ready to take. And at the end of the day, this is the world you have to fight, to postpone it as much as possible, and to be in a position to do it again if will be a need.
Well, I agree, and I don't think there is a need to blow up every possible, site. It's really about, again, what will it take to bring the Iranians and whatever government it happens to be in there at the end of this to the negotiating table to give us the end state that we, the United States, we, Israel, and frankly, our other allies with the Straits of Hormuz want to see. And it may not need to destroy everything. It's really about hitting that, what it will take to get them over to a place where, when they negotiate in our favor. So in other words, what do we want to get out of it? And that's frankly, the big question. What is the end state? What does the end state look like? Where will we be happy? And look, I think, we've always tried to do the big shift to the Pacific, which was purposeful and it was important because, there's some near peer competitors out there and we have issues in the South China Sea and all sorts of things that are going on there. But, we never really left the Middle East. We've always had ships there. So what will it take in the future? Probably take, some type of capability to be there, maybe on a constant basis for the next year or so, while we see and make sure that the Iranians, when they come to the negotiating table, really do what they say they're going to do. So we'll see. I think it's probably in the cards that we're going to be there for a while, maybe not, and hopefully not in a full wartime state, but in a patrol status. I think we're going to see that for quite some time.
And remember that after the war, to add economic pressure and other pressures on the Iranians and to make them isolated in the area, it's a combination that a weaker Iran with pressure on its economy, what will remain, and diplomatic efforts to isolate it together, I think. It might happen that they will come to negotiate. I'm saying it because I remember when we had been told they will never discuss with the American the nuclear issue, and with a very strong economic pressure, they came to negotiate. Yeah. The fact that the Americans didn't succeed to achieve a good agreement is because they're negotiators, not because the Iranians were strong. They were very weak. But I think that the combination of all the three efforts, the kinetic effort, the economic effort, and the diplomatic effort, can bring the Iranians to negotiate at the end.
I agree, and I think we're seeing it now, and I think it's time that it becomes more than just a two-nation coalition. Our NATO allies and the rest of the world need to be a part of this, and I think the more the rest of the world is a part of it, the stronger our ability to do exactly what the general was saying about the other type of pressures that we can continue on Iran. That, I think, is sort of an end game that can work.
Well, Admiral Shelanski, General Amidror, thank you very much for your time. I did want to flag an abuse of our Q&A function. General Chuck Wald, rather than submitting a question, submitted a comment but it is one that I fully agree with. He said Admiral Shelanski was super, and I agree with that, as were you, General Amidror. You always are. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. Please stay tuned to JINSA.org for all our latest updates and analysis on the war in Iran. And look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
everybody. Yeah, good
Thank
to
you,
see you,
everybody.
General.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thanks, Blaze.